Well, I'm excited today to introduce our speaker. And I told Doug earlier, I was thinking about he and Gloria, and we go back 25 years or more. And I didn't realize till this morning that that was shortly after he got to Brownsville. But Gloria was working in a suite next door to where I was, and she had a big job. Oh, the United Way suite was next door. Anyway, we had a good time, and I met Doug then, and he was involved with an interesting device for healing. And I just know him to be a real interesting person and a great person to speak to us. He always covers one of our unity principles, which is we create our experiences by what we choose to think and feel and believe. And Doug has really helped me with his thoughts on that very thing. Doug, please come and enlighten us today.
I'm always delighted to be here. Just, home away from home. Okay, well, I need to turn this thing on. Suffering. Why we suffer so much and what we can do to eliminate most of it. Oh, I said almost most of us. Well, that would certainly do away with a lot of suffering, wouldn't it? Anyway, I started my path with spirituality years ago, let's say decades. And I did like most younger people. Can I do that? A little closer? Okay. Okay, I'll try not to bite it. But I did like most young people who don't know much about spirituality. I asked a friend, and she directed me to a whole lot of books and everything. So I started reading everything I could get my hands about the masters and sages who were walking, had been on the planet. And the more I read about them, the more I realized that I need to focus on their message, not necessarily focus on the messenger, because the message that they brought was what was important. So I started studying the messages. And the more I studied the messages, the more I realized I need to eliminate about most of the verbiage, because it was about environment, politics, or climate. And I thought, well, that's strange, but harsh and unforgiving climates create harsh and unforgiving theologies. And look where Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, that's where they developed, in harsh climates. So sometimes they weren't so forgiving until Jesus got here. And the more I studied that, and the more I got rid of the extraneous stuff, the more I got down to the nitty gritty. And I came to the conclusion that there are two messages, only two. Oops. What's that? It's on. Try that. Shit. Excuse me. Message one. You are not what you think. I think everybody in this room gets that one right off the bat, We know that. We are not what we think. So, what is our actual identity? Have you ever thought about who you really are? Who makes the choices in your life? And what is your true identity? Well, we're always spirit, even while we have a body. And we're manifesting in this physical reality. And there are aspects of spirit that completely overwhelm us and are not comprehensible by any of us. I mean, it's just something that there are no words. and there's no reference. Basically, the only thing we can do is experience ourselves as spirit. Now, the masters all used metaphors in their teaching. So for this lesson, I'm going to use a metaphor for spirit that will help us relate to and use an empowering aspect of spirit to decrease our suffering. And I'm going to call this aspect the thinker. Now, the thinker is our consciousness, but it has its own reality. As the thinker, we are not our thoughts. We're not the object of our thoughts. We're not the results of our thoughts. And we're not even our opinion about the results of our thoughts. We're the thinker. And the thinker doesn't suffer, right? The thinker is animating force. It doesn't suffer. So why do we? The thinker works in our brain in two ways. Our brain either does what the thinker tells it to do or what the thinker allows it to do. And those are all our habits. And I'm not going to say that all habits are bad, because the vast majority of the habits we have are successful habits. They get us through today and they'll get us through tomorrow. So I'm not painting the habits as being a bad thing, but we all have habits we'd really like to change. So we are not our thoughts. We are the thinker, and we use thoughts. Now, we only believe something is really true if we experience it. And each of us needs to experience the actuality of our identity as the thinker, okay? So I'm going to teach you how to experience yourself as spirit in 3 seconds. Are you ready? I need you all to focus, okay? Ready? You did it. You did it. Now, it sounds crazy, but you did it. Give yourself some applause. Oh, I see some blank looks out there. What did I do? You used your spirit. You used the thinker, and you waited. You put your brain on hold. You stopped thinking. That shows you something. The reason for the applause is you are empowered to do it. If you can do it then, and you did it for 3 seconds, 5 seconds, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing as meditation, mindfulness. It's the same thing that happens when you use change the channel. The thinker stops everything else and gives you the ability to choose. So that's why I'm saying, you needed to give yourself a round of applause, because this shows you can do it. And if you can do it then, you can do it any time. And interrupting our thoughts is incredibly important, because our actuality as spirit exists between our thoughts. So as we allow our thoughts to space out, that's where our peace is. That's where our reality is. Well, what's going on here? There you go. Oops. Message number 2, though. Message 1 is you're not what you think you are. Now, message number 2 is you're exactly what you think you are. Okay. Because just like Alice said, our thoughts create our reality. If we're suffering, why are we suffering? Because our thoughts are creating an environment, either mentally or physically, in which we have no option other than to suffer. So what are we going to do about that? Because thinking is obviously the root cause of that. So This slide, I think I showed the last time I was here. And it's about anxiety, but you can actually take anxiety and say suffering, negative emotions, anger, fear, guilt, shame, whatever, because anxiety is just the primary negative emotion. Everything else is built on it. But anyway, over here on the left-hand side, we have problems or activities, and we have severity of consequences. And the bottom part of the graph is level of competence. And I think it talked about driving, that when we start driving, we have no competence, and the consequences of driving are horribly scary. And so when we start, we're really, really anxious. But as we gain competence, we learn to trust ourselves to do the activity in a safe way that will create the kind of results that we want. And our anxiety goes away. Our suffering stops. Anxiety is suffering, just on a little scale. Okay? So which skills create the most suffering in our lives? Relationships, making choices, and managing emotions. They cause at least 90 to 95% of our suffering. Does anybody in here disagree with that? I've only had one person out of 2,000 or 3,000 that I've asked a question. I usually give this as a quiz. But the reason they do is we can look around and we know that our relationships aren't working. Our choices are creating more problems than they solve, and our negative emotions are out of control. The key to fixing this lies in the answers to these two questions. How old are we when the development of those three skills peaks? Anybody got a guess? If you know it, if you've heard me say it before, don't say anything. Don't do like my sister. I know. Anybody hazard a guess? 7? 2? 12? Some people say never. Actually, the answer is 18 months. 18 months. Yeah. And how long do those skills dictate our choices? The rest of our lives. And the reason is very simple. See, that's what it says. But these skills are unlikely to change after we are 7. So what does that mean? The lesson in that is that we are all using the skills of a 5-year-old to manage our lives as teens and adults. So that's why we suffer. We're using the wrong skills. Does it make sense? Okay, so the answer is obvious. Fix the skills, upgrade the skills. The skill of change is pretty simple. 3 things have to happen. We have to stop doing it the way we're doing it, because that's what causes us our suffering and our problems. 2, we have to have a better skill to use after we interrupt it. I mean, if we're stressed, I mean, you see this on the television all the time. If you're stressed, go for a run. Eat some food, talk to a friend. That interrupts it. But the problems and the old skills are still there. Likewise, you can try doing something different, like the self-help guys all say. This is how you fix your relationships. Da, 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 da. But you haven't changed the old habit. So it creeps back in. And we must practice the skill until it becomes our habit. I like to use the analogy of, say I was out there shooting hoops. Michael Jordan came by and he said, well, if he didn't say you ought to quit, he would say, you need to hold the ball like this. You need to put your feet like that. You need to, And I would take his advice literally. And he'd say, now, do this 1,000 times the correct way, and it will overwrite the old habit. And why does it do that? How does that work? Okay, let's go back to that slide that we're talking about 18 months. Do you think an 18-month-old understands language? No. Our brain, see, we're primarily primate, and there's this little part of our brain that if you all saw Tom Hanks and when he's talking about the dumb as a box of rocks, he's talking about that brain because it has no language, has no capacity to reason, and does not tell time. All it does is watch and copy. So we can't talk to it. And that's one of the reasons that talk therapy doesn't work as well as it needs to. What we need to do is we need to do something different. And that little part of our brain likes new things that it does well. I mean, think about all the skills that you do well. You enjoy them, right? That's right. Now, if you think about the skills you don't do well, you don't enjoy them. Well, what are emotions? The reason we're going to start with this is I find that, again, Forrest Gump and that little, dumb as a box of rocks part of his brain, that's the part of our brain that runs emotions. It's not smart at all. You can't talk to it. And when people are really emotional, it's like they're on fire. You can't say, calm down. They just don't. They don't get it. So I help people, the first thing I help people do is get control of their emotions. And so I think it really helps to understand what emotions actually are. Freud and everybody since then has said that they're automatic and uncontrollable. They aren't. Emotions are conscious phenomena. They're conscious conclusions about the results our skills have produced or the results we either imagine or predict that we are going to produce with our skills in the future. That's what anxiety is we're predicting that what we're going to do is going to turn out wrong. And what we know about speak the word, right? Because it becomes reality. Emotions, they are not facts. They're not commands, they're not danger alerts. They're processed by our subconscious, by that dumb as a box of rocks part brain. They're deaf to reason, so we can't reason with them. And they're updated and changed just by recalling them. Now, that's one of the most amazing things about our memories. We think that a memory is solid and it's static and it doesn't change. But you take a young couple who's madly in love and they say, oh, this is the most wonderful person in the world. And I can't wait to get married and spend the rest of our life. Okay, well, fast forward and the guy does something wrong. And she thinks about it. And it opens that memory and it puts in this little tiny bit of negativity. And he does it again, or he does something else, or he does something worse. And every time he does that, she opens the memory and starts stacking this negativity in there. And pretty soon, the negativity overwhelms everything else that was in there. And so now we've changed from this wonderful guy to I can't wait till the divorce is final, But neither of the parties have changed. They haven't changed anything. They just overwrote their memories. So I help people understand that about emotions, that they're conscious. We create them. And if they're conscious, we can control them or eliminate them. But the best thing to do is just not make them. So this is a really busy slide, and I apologize. But relationships. I think once we understand relationships, it kind of makes everything else a little bit easier because these are foundation skills. Every skill we have is built on relationships and making choices and managing emotions. Those are the foundation skills. Every skill is built on those. And everything in our brains does is about relationships. It's a relationship processor. This little tiny brain, or this tiny toddler's brain, what it's doing is learning by watching and copying what the parents or the other people in its immediate environment are doing in that environment. And because those are the skills that baby brain says, I need to know how to do that to survive. That's it in a nutshell. And so the first 18 months of a child's life, the first 1,000 days, from conception to 3, are the most important period in its life. So we tend to think of all relationships when we talk about relationships as interpersonal, but everything we do is a relationship. Time, space, different, everything that we do gets related to other experiences. When I have a new experience, my brain just automatically compares it to everything else that I've done and finds something kind of like that and says, oh, this is what it means. Well, it might, but it might not. Every relationship is formed to reach a goal. Think about getting your car fixed. You establish a relationship with that. You establish a relationship with that hamburger you're going to have. You establish an even better relationship with Bluebell ice cream. But right. But everything we do is relationships. So we just need to think about that. Every relationship serves a purpose in our life, whether it's real or imagined. Okay. It's like I see this brand new Cadillac Escalade. Oh, I gotta have it. Just absolutely gotta have it. Gotta have it. Don't forget the debt. Forget the payments. You know, I gotta have it. But if we take time to evaluate the purpose behind the goal, we'd get rid of most of the junk in our life because it serves no real purpose. It's an imaginary purpose. We need to know what is truly important enough to use our energy. There's a chapter in the course called Synonyms That Aren't, because we use an awful lot of words as though they are synonyms. Needs and wants are not synonyms. Needs are food, shelter, and nurturing. Self-initiated actions are required to meet needs. I can be hungry, but if somebody brings me food, I'm the one who has to eat. If there's a storm, I need to seek shelter. I need to do that. And to meet my need for nurturing, I can't wait. I must nurture someone else. More blessed to give than to receive. And there's a reason that nurturing is so vitally important, besides the fact that we all grew up. It's even in our genes that we need each other to survive. But the way our brain works with nurturing is we act in real time. Actually, not just nurturing, is everything. We act in real time, but then our brain takes a look at the relationships and says, what's that mean? And so it reflects back to me that I'm a nurturing being. If I do something really ugly, it reflects back my ugliness. So it's nurture. But wants or anything else, just anything and everything. And if we look at what will wants do for those things, can we eat once? Can we shelter with wants? Can we nurture with wants? No. The dictionary just describes want as to not have. This, I think, is once we understand relationships and emotions, I think making choices is probably the most elegant skill we can learn, because everything is about choice. We have all the education, we have all the experience and everything. Now, how can we make such a mess out of it? Because we don't understand how to make the kinds of choices that will evolve our lives and benefit the planet. Now, the principles, we talk about principles, but actually, if we look at these, this is what we value also. But this is how we qualify the thoughts and the information that we're going to use to make a choice. Is it impartial? Is it just? Is it calm? Am I calm? See, these things are just as much adjectives and adverbs as they are in their nouns. I mean, if you look up a dictionary, they'll probably tell you mostly that they're nouns and adjectives, but they're adverbs as well. In other words, how we do something. Now, when we're thinking, do we think honestly? Are we impartial? Are we just? Are we kind? Just like you said, just like Jeanette said. Patient, peaceful, reliable, respectful, tolerant, trustworthy. Those are the qualities that we need to apply to the information that we're using to make a choice. Interpersonal relationships. This is just the most special kind of relationship. Well, not special. You got to eat, you have to drink, you have to sleep. Those things are kind of vitally important. But when going back to, and I saw Gloria looked at me when I said every relationship is formed to reach a goal, because she wanted me to make sure that I didn't really step in it too hard, because the goal for an interpersonal relationship cannot be one that the relationship is over when the goal is reached, like the plumber, or the mechanic, or your sandwich. The goal for a close and nurturing relationship is to create, maintain, and protect a safe and nurturing environment so the love and affection we share is not harmed. Now, there's a whole lot of other aspects about interpersonal relationships that are a little bit different. But let me tell you, whose responsibility is it? Whose responsibility is it to create, maintain, and protect? Mine. That's exactly right. The most important thing about an interpersonal relationship is what I bring to it. As a matter of fact, our greatest responsibility in a relationship is to continually be asking ourselves these three questions. Currently, we say, who are you that I should be in a relationship with you? What are you going to do for me? Wrong. Who am I that you would want to be in a relationship with me? What qualities do I bring to this relationship that will encourage and empower you to evolve your life and cherish this relationship with me? And will my next choice support the goal of this relationship? Commitment takes on a completely different meaning. Because commitment isn't, well, will you commit? What's that mean? Commitment here is actions and choices that foster the goal, that support the goal. Lack of commitment, you don't. Pretty simple. I need to be really careful about my choices, diligent in how I process that information, because I value the relationship with that lady above and beyond any other relationship I've ever had with anybody. I went to work one day, walking down here's all these curtains. And I'm walking down there. Next to the last curtain I get to is where my patient is. I walked around the corner. I looked into her eyes and I was done. Literally, it was over. I knew in my heart that my life would never be complete unless she was in it. And every time, well, there's only been one other time that she actually upset me. I remember that moment. I go back to that moment because that moment was what was real about us. It was love, but love is a spiritual awareness. It isn't a fondness or an attachment. Real love is a spiritual event. And that one just almost knocked me over. Is that it? I guess that's it. I want to leave you with this thought. Khalil Gibran, you know, he wrote The Prophet. Marvelous guy. I think I read everything he ever wrote. He said, we speak when we cease to be at peace with our own thoughts. I sincerely hope that what I have spoken today will help you find more peace with yours. Thank you.